October 24th, 1999. This is the fourth Waking Up class. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all again. The spiritual master, Jesus the Christ, said 3 or 4 things that we're going to sort of talk about tonight, this afternoon. The first one he said is, and these are all paraphrases, and I don't know where in the Bible you can find them, but the first one that he says is, take no thought for tomorrow, what you will eat, or what you will drink, or what you'll clothe yourself with. And that sounds like very impractical advice, and I've actually heard people from the pulpit say that, that was something you could say maybe back in his day and time, but, that's not practical advice today. You can't do that today. And I want to talk a little bit about what that meant. And then he said, in another place, he said, keep your mind on God, and all these things will be added unto you. Keep your attention on God, keep your mind on the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. So that's the other half of the story. And he said somewhere, he said, my kingdom is not your kingdom, and my things are not your things. And these are all very cryptical things that he said that I never did hear discussed very well in any of the churches I attended, but the meaning has become very clear to me now. If we're in human consciousness, we get in the game of taking thought about tomorrow. What am I going to do about this? What will I do about that? Should I choose this? Should I do that? What am I going to eat? What job should I take? And we are in the mode of taking thought. And this game is endless. Taking thought goes on forever. It never brings peace or comfort. Always, if you're confronted with a choice, and the choice is A or B, if you choose A, your mind will immediately tell you all the good things about the B decision. And when you choose B, your mind will immediately start listing all the positive factors about A and the negative things about B. And as fast as you go back and forth, your mind will make you think about one thing or the other. And as soon as you do one or the other, so that that's off your list, your mind will immediately start thinking about the next thing and figuring that out. As soon as one worry is met, your mind will worry about the next thing. It's a push-down stack, sort of a spring push-down stack with all sorts of things on it, and there's a worry. Number one worry is on the top, and you worry about number one worry until the time has passed, and you pull it off, and the next one just goes boing, and it springs right to the top and raises its hand, and you start working on that one. And this is the nature of the human mind. Our whole purpose as human beings is to take care of ourselves and worry about the other guy and get ours first and all this sort of thing. And this is the nature of the human mind. And this is in fact the human condition. The human condition is one of thinking and worrying about stuff and being upset. If you get what you're worried about, you're afraid you'll lose it. If you don't have it, you're afraid you won't get it. It's an endless source of dis-ease. This is essentially Buddha's first noble truth. Humankind is being human is suffering, is a paraphrase of Buddha's first noble truth. The problem, of course, is that it's not you that's doing this thinking and worrying. It's all of humanity that's doing this thinking and worrying. The 5 billion are out there broadcasting their concerns about this into the one consciousness, and you're picking it up. And so it doesn't make any difference at all whether you've resolved an issue or not. The 5 billion haven't. They're out there broadcasting, and they will continue to broadcast, and there will always be great concern in mankind, and it will always be broadcast, and we will always be picking it up if we're attuned to that. So So one problem is that just being associated, being in the human consciousness makes us wide open to all of that. The other thing that we've learned over the past 3 weeks, 3 classes, is that if you remember the principle that we were on last week, that my experience is the outpicturing of my own state of consciousness, my own content of consciousness, then you realize that worrying about what's out there, trying to get your stuff from out there, trying to acquire the necessary things, trying to keep the necessary things, all that is the wrong way. You're trying to get something from the outpicturing rather than from the source. There's nothing out there that you can get. If you're looking I'll say right now, out there is an outpicturing of my own consciousness, and it's like a reflection. If I'm looking at myself in the mirror, let's say I'm brushing my hair and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I decide I don't like what I see, I can get a set of shears and sit there and try to cut the picture in the mirror. I'm looking at the picture in the mirror, that's what I don't like, and so I can work on the picture in the mirror, or if you're a lady putting on makeup, you can cover up the blemishes with lipstick by scribbling it on the mirror. You can do all sorts of things to that picture in the mirror, and nothing has changed. Nothing will ever change, because the source of that reflection is you. And if you walk to the next mirror, there you are again. The work has to be done on you, and then the mirror will reflect it. Consciousness works the same way. The work has to be done within consciousness, and then the outpicturing reflects it. The reason Jesus said, take no thought for tomorrow what you'll eat or drink or put on or all that stuff, is to the extent that you are worrying about those things, food and water and clothes and stuff like that, you are tying yourself to the human consciousness. Desire, the Eastern philosophies always say that eventually we have to get rid of desire, and the reason we have to get rid of desire is if we're desiring something out there, first of all, we're desiring something which is a reflection of our own consciousness, and therefore it's a useless exercise to desire it. But second of all, wanting things keeps us tied to the human consciousness, and that excuse me, keeps us tied to the 5 billion consciousness, and that human consciousness, that human thinking, that human worrying, that human discomfort continues. The truth is that the body that I appear to be wearing and the world that it's in is an outpicturing of my own consciousness. And if I work on that consciousness, the picture will change, just as if I work on my own face, the picture in the mirror will change. It's an absolute necessity. It is, the world is not out there. The world is my concept of the truth. So if I want to change the picture, I have to change my concepts, I have to change my thinking, I have to change my understanding of what the truth is. Now, the other side of what Jesus said, keep your mind stayed on God, and all these things will be added unto you. What God was saying, what Jesus was saying was, if you focus your consciousness on God, which is to say on your own reality, which is to say, if you keep your consciousness focused on the fact that you are a spiritual being and one with God, then, first of all of this stuff out here becomes immaterial, because if you know you're one with God, and if you're having the experience of being one with God, then what you have materially is nonsense. So first of all, the whole issue just disappears if you get to where you're having the experience of your oneness with God. The other thing is that the nature of God is infinite. The nature of God is abundant. The nature of God is eternal. The nature of God is harmony. The nature of God is omnipotence. God is the only power. There is no other power. The nature of God is omniscience. All the answers are there. Omnipresence. All the answers are here. If you go there, then all these things will be added unto you in that when you're in the consciousness of your God's, your abundance, your external picture, which is a reflection of your consciousness, must be abundant. If you are aware of your omniscience, the answers will come. So the point of all this is that the discipline is to develop, as I've said in the previous 3 classes, and what this whole series of talks is about, is that the work is to develop a realization of our oneness with God, and all the rest of this will be added unto us. So now it's pretty clear, my things are not your things. Jesus is saying that he knows he's one with God, and his things are all spiritual and harmonious and all those things, and our things, your things, are the things of the world. And my kingdom is not your kingdom. His kingdom is the spiritual kingdom, i.e. spiritual consciousness. I don't like the word kingdom because kingdom always sounds like heaven, sounds like a place somewhere, but that's not the point. What he's talking about, the kingdom is a state of consciousness. Heaven is a state of consciousness. And he was a fully realized master and knew who he was. And he knew that we didn't. So his kingdom is not our kingdom, and his things are not our things. So that's what that's all about. It brings forth some very immediate result. I mean, the question is, of course, well, what do I do? About the fact that my consciousness isn't there right now. So I don't worry about what I'm going to eat or drink tomorrow, and I start working on meditation. And what happens if I starve to death before I have the realization? And I say, yeah, that is a danger. You certainly cannot afford to operate from a place at which your consciousness is not yet. But you can begin practicing these truths and attempting to demonstrate these truths. And they are very demonstrable. To the really neat thing about spiritual work, it always sounds like infinite number of lifetimes and everything to become enlightened, but it takes what it takes to become enlightened. Who knows when it'll happen, this lifetime or another. But every step you make towards it is an improvement in your understanding, and every improvement in your understanding is a change in your consciousness, and every change in your consciousness outpictures. The picture must change. And so as you do the work, the picture cleans up. Everything gets better. It's perfectly reasonable to expect to be essentially never sick, to expect to be essentially always provided for, to be essentially always comfortable, and we will get caught up by the broadcast of the 5 billion periodically. But to the extent that you're doing the work, you can have the consciousness that produces abundance and produces health and produces well-being and produces harmony and produces all these things. But you have to be doing the practice. And the practice is to start working towards expecting these things. It is absolutely clear that if you expect there to not be enough, there will not be enough. The primary reason for not wanting to get something from out there is that if you want to get it, you're saying you don't have it. And if your state of consciousness is, I don't have, the I don't have will outpicture, and you will not get it. And, trying to get is the consciousness of I don't have. The consciousness of I don't have outpictures as not having. If you can come from the consciousness of I expect, then things happen. If you can come from the consciousness of I have, then your life is truly abundant. If you're always in the position of I have, then you're always in abundance. Everything you need is there, because if you have the full realization, then you understand that I have everything I need, and therefore it appears, but without pictures. But you don't need to have the full consciousness. All you really have to do is, at whatever level you have that consciousness, that's the level without pictures. This is the real reason behind tithing. The I guess originally Jewish and subsequently Christian tradition of tithing 10% of your income. You're giving it to charity. The idea is give it to some impersonal, spiritual, perhaps, some impersonal area, social structure in the world that you feel like supporting that does not benefit you directly, so that you're not giving it to yourself. And the purpose of tithing is not to bribe God, so that God will know you're a good guy and give you more or something like that, because God's not withholding. The purpose of tithing is every time you give 10% off the top, or 2% or 3%, you don't need to start at 10%, but if you give 2% or 3% off the top, you're saying, I have. You're saying, I have abundance. I can give 3% of my salary to various causes. I can do this. I have. And your consciousness is I have. And that is immediately reflected to that extent by your having. Joel says somewhere, and this is funny because I'm absolutely certain I read this or heard it on a tape, and I have never seen it again or met anybody who has seen it or heard it. Nonetheless, Joel says somewhere, and it may have been from him to me, but Joel says somewhere that if you really have absolutely nothing, steal something and give it away. He said, steal $10 and give it away to get the pipe working, to prime the pump. I was a boy back in Tennessee, and we had our own well, and we had a pump. And you had to prime the pump. You had to pour some water in there to get it out in order to get more coming in. So you have to prime the pump. So what he was saying is prime the pump. The typical thing to do is to go through your closets and, give away clothes that you haven't worn in a year or two, and start that way. You can always give away stuff that you don't use, and you can move from that up to giving money to charities or to organizations you like. You can give time. In AA we have a wonderful opportunity to give. I have time to work with you. And that's such a wonderful thing. And I have consciousness to share with you. I can share with you. I can take you through the books. I can show you the steps. I can, and this is all I have. And handed out pictures in AA. That's one of the reasons that AA works. So supply is about outflow, not income. Most spiritual things are exactly opposite from our material human consciousness interpretation of them. And supply is outflow, not income. You measure your supply by how much you're giving away, how much you're pouring out. There's a couple of examples in the Bible, once again, of Jesus feeding the 5,000 people with 2 or 3 fish and a couple of loaves of bread. He said, what do we have? He didn't say, oh my God, we haven't got enough to feed 5,000 people. If he'd said that, it would have been true. But he said, what do we have? And they said, we have, a few loaves and a couple of fish. And he says, break and pass it out. And so they did. They started breaking it and passing it out. The other example is Elijah or one of those guys talking to a poor widow who had nothing that she could bring to make the necessary offering, the necessary sacrifice, I guess, at the Jewish synagogue. And Elijah looks at her and says, well, what do you have? And she thinks, and she says, oh, well, I forgot. She says, but I have this cruet and I have a few drops of oil in it. And so he says, pour. And so she gets the cruet and starts pouring, and the oil just pours and pours and pours, and they're filling vats and carrying them away, and she's just pouring and pouring, much more oil out of this cruet than could be in there. Of course, it helped to have Elijah's consciousness there rather than hers. But the principle was established. The point is, what do you have for? And this is the fundamental secret of supply. It worked for me, a personal story. It worked for me once before I really understood all this. Back in 1984 or 5, 15 years ago, I was just back from India and broke flat, and I'd made some rather arrogant spiritual decisions and found myself out of work. Arrogance has always been my favorite, by the way. And found myself out of work, and I was renting a room from fortunately a good friend of mine, and I had no work for 5 or 6 months, and after about 3 months I was totally out of money. Also, my credit was not yet healed. I did not yet have credit, so I had no credit cards, and I was forced to pay my meager rent to her for that room by borrowing money from her on her credit card, which of course shot down every concept I had about male self-sufficiency, and you don't work, you don't eat, and you got to take care of yourself, and all this nonsense that a good Tennessee boy learns early was shot down. I was very uncomfortable in talking to my sponsor at least 3 times a day and meditating 20 times a day, trying to remember the truth that I was working on. So in any event, I was really broke, and then I had an awakening, and I saw the arrogance, and I changed and got a job the next day, having seen the error. My answer was, all right, God, don't put anything in front of me that you don't want me to do. And the next day I was offered work, a really nice job at a little house down here on the Strand in El Porto, as a matter of fact. But so I'm there for another half a year, and I really have no money at all. And then my mother dies, and I knew I was going to get about $25,000 out of the estate. And the lady that I was renting the house from was moving to some place where she could buy a house, so I told Don Servio, I said, hey Don, I'm going to have about $25,000, find me a house, find me something. He says, what do you want? I said, a house on the Strand, of course. Put me in any little house on the beach that you can find me for $25,000. And he chuckled, and I chuckled, and he said, I'll keep it in mind. And so we went our way, and the estate didn't close. And about 6 months later, Don called and says, I found your house. And sure enough, he'd found a house just a block down from here, a little 1915 beach cottage. It was on a little 20-foot wide piece of property, 1 block from the beach, pretty close to the Strand. And he got me into it for $18,000. That was the 10% down payment on it was $180,000 for that half a lot at that time. And the deal flowed, and I got into it. And about 7 years later, my mother's estate cleared, and I got the $25,000. I bought a house, paid the $18,000, moved into a house a block from the beach. All this on the expectation that I would have the money. I knew it was coming, and so the money appeared. It did not come from where I thought it would come from, but the money appeared. The house got bought, and it was, like I say, 7 or 8 years later that money happened. It was just the fact that I thought it was coming that allowed me to do all that. And had I been smart enough to know that escrows like that, estates like that, typically take 5 years because there was a piece of property out of state and everything involved, I would never have gotten started, because I would have said, no, that's not going to happen. There's no knowing when it's going to happen, and I'd still be living in a room over on the other side of the hill. So there's a practical example of supply. Thinking that I had it. I had it. A minute. No, I think it's all been said. I just want to reiterate a couple of things. When you, to the extent, not when, but to the extent that you realize your spiritual nature, to that extent is all of this material stuff nonsense. It really, when you are in the state of oneness, even for a moment, or when you're experiencing that off and on even, all of the material stuff makes no difference at all, first of all, because it is material, and the reality is spiritual, and the material stuff is just your concept of the spiritual truth. I'm waiting to be led to find some way to show you what I mean, because it's all I really know is that, you know, I don't want this to turn into a biography, but, you know, my own experience has demonstrated over and over and over again that, you know, that there is a plan, that there is abundance, that my needs are always met. And, you know, that's happened so long now that I am no longer concerned about it at all. The outpicturing is always in the material world, but the consciousness is of spiritual truth. The consciousness is of the abundance of God and the harmony of God and the eternality of God and all these things. The consciousness is that knowing that I am a spiritual being, then I cannot lack anything. God, consciousness, is the creator and the substance of everything. Everything is an idea in consciousness. And so you can look at that as saying that consciousness is the real substance of everything, or everything is made up of consciousness, or everything is in consciousness. And the consciousness is infinite, so everything is really partaking of the infinity. And also, all these ideas that we have about time and space and limitation and individuality and all that stuff is outside of the God consciousness. It's like this whole space-time thing is just a little bubble inside of the consciousness, and God is outside of that consciousness, and so are we. And so there can't possibly, you know, the idea of anything happening to us is inconceivable, since we're outside of the realm in which things happen. Our truth is outside of that, and above that it's just this little picture that we're dealing with today that is inside this time-space bubble. So the reality is that it's impossible for anything to happen to us. It's impossible for us to lack. It's impossible for there not to be harmony. It's impossible for there not to be eternality. And to the extent that we get a sense of that, or even a hint of that, to that extent does our life start changing. So let's try to go there just for a minute, and then we'll be quiet, and then we'll have questions. So get quiet and get a sense of me, of little me. I am, I. And you can sort of whisper it to yourself when you exhale. I. Get a sense of this I. This I. It's got a body. It's in a body. Sort of thinking. This thinking is going on inside its head bone. Here is I. And then notice that you're aware of this I. You're aware of this little me. This little me, and being aware of it means you're conscious of it. And being conscious of this little me means that it's in your consciousness. And so suddenly we have a problem, because instead of me being inside the head bone here thinking or something like that, I am now this consciousness, and me is inside of that consciousness. So I'm a step back, I'm a step bigger. I am an awareness that includes this little me, this little I concept. Now this me doesn't have a physical body. It doesn't have any of Lee's attributes. It doesn't have Lee's age or Lee's... I mean, this me that's been aware of Lee within its consciousness is the same. It was the same when Lee was a baby, and Lee was 20, and Lee is now 58. And this consciousness was the same when Lee was arrogant and when Lee was peaceful. And this consciousness, this awareness that contains this Lee was the same at all those different ages, and before and after all these educations and all this awareness of Lee has been there and unchanging while Lee has been doing this silly dance. So now let's be aware of this, of that awareness. Let's sit in that awareness for a second. See if you can be aware of awareness, not of the content of it. Don't be aware of a little I, but be aware of this big consciousness that is aware of the little I. Now within this big consciousness is also the room, the waterfall, the chimes outside. All these things are in this consciousness. This awareness contains all these things as well as Lee, as well as this little I. The minute it starts thinking, it's Lee again. That's always the problem. It's when it's silent that it's aware. This awareness is the impersonal expression of God that we refer to as the Christ or as the Buddha mind. I'm not talking about that which is aware, and I'm not talking about that which it is aware of. I'm talking about the awareness. When Joel talks about God individually expressing itself, this is what he's talking about. It's awareness expressing itself as awareness. So let's sit here for a second and get the sense of this consciousness. Now this consciousness, this awareness, doesn't change whether I'm sick or well, or whether I'm abundant or poor or lack or old or young. This awareness is just awareness. It's absolutely undefinable. It has no qualities of its own except awareness. Clearly nothing in this material world, nothing of which it is conscious, can touch it or mar it or alter it or make an impact on it or change it in any way. Just awareness. Now here it is. Infinitely abundant. Nothing ever takes anything away from it, no matter what you outpicture in this material world. This that we're looking at now is not diminished in any way. It's infinitely expressed. Harmonious is such a silly word for perfect peace, my peace. Sort of a sad thing to be omnipotent and have nothing to use power on. Omnipotence with nothing that needs power. So now see if you can be aware of the silence that surrounds this awareness. See if you can see or get a glimpse of the silence that is all around, underpinning this awareness, the silence from which this awareness springs. Silence isn't the right word, of course, because it may contain all noise. No thing, nothing. Void isn't the right word because we can recognize void against it or within it. There is no right word. It's absolutely inexpressible. Has no characteristic. If it had a characteristic, that would be a concept, and it would be within it. It wouldn't be it. And this too is you. This too is you. All three of these. All the levels. Become aware you're breathing again. Find me in all of this again. And come back to the room. So I've been talking to a few of you since the last class, and some people are having some really good realizations and may or may not want to share them, and others have had questions. And so now let's use the next, well, whatever time we want to use to ask questions or share or do whatever it is you want to do with it. Anybody have questions? Or? See, there aren't any questions once you've been there, are there? I'm reminded that Rajneesh told me once, he says, I'm not here to answer your questions. He says, every time I answer a question, you think of 10 new ones. Mm-hmm. Which is true. He's not talking to me directly, but to all of us, and that's the nature of the mind. You get an answer to a question, and you say, oh, and then you say, but what about? He says, my purpose is not to answer your questions. My purpose is to get you to stop asking questions. But the point is not to stop asking questions while you have questions. The point is to get to the consciousness where the questions are irrelevant, like where the things are irrelevant. So we all have to ask questions until we're done asking questions. We have to do everything until we're done doing it. Can't arrest anything in process. You can't not ask questions because it's not cool or not spiritual. If you have questions, you ask questions. And if you need to do this, you do this. When Rajneesh was fully enlightened, he still tore around India for 20 years, just raising hell. I mean, preaching from the backs of railroad cars and saying terrible things about Mahatma Gandhi and the rest of the Gandhi clan, who were the prime ministers of India at the time and such like, and getting thrown out of towns. And he was just a fire-burning rabble-rouser. And he went around for 20 years just, running little meditation camps and getting followers and just having a great time telling the truth about the political situation without pulling any punches or varnishing anything, and just having a glorious time. And he did this for 21 years. And then he went to Pune and opened the ashram and sat down and sat there for 15 years and never went outside and never did anything political. And he was asked, well, what was that all about? And he said, well, I had to burn the energy. It wasn't done. He was done. He was fully enlightened, but he was just watching the body run, because the body wasn't done doing that yet. So it's cool to be where you are doing exactly what you're doing, whatever that might be.
So if there's an area of your life where you accepted a suggestion that you don't have something, or you have something you don't want, or whatever, that you suggest for people to, I know you said, be doing the work, be developing your consciousness, but then you can also ask for help too.
Mm-hmm. Sure. While you're wearing a body, Jesus also, I like using Jesus. I want to make it clear that Jesus, to me, was one of the very great spiritual masters. And I talk about Jesus, the Christ, exactly as Buddha was one of the very great spiritual masters. And I talk about Gautama, the Buddha. Gautama was a great spiritual master. So when I'm talking about Jesus, this is not singling him out as some or any particular religion. It's just that his stories and his parables and all that stuff is so much more accessible to me, first of all because I was brought up in that tradition, and second of all because Joel uses it a lot, and I've done an awful lot of Joel listening. So what was I about to say about Jesus? I forget where I was going with that. He says, render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. I mean, when you're in the world, you play the material game, but you know the truth to the extent that you can know the truth. It takes practice to take no thought about tomorrow, to not worry about the fact that you're not going to have a job or don't have a job or something like that. It takes a lot of practice. And you start where you can start. And you will worry about whatever worries you. There's no question about that. You will worry about it. You can't stop worrying. You will worry about it, but you can also do the work. And you can begin testing this stuff. It's like, play like you're in a laboratory, a spiritual laboratory. Run experiment. Try tithing at 1%. Try giving or not even at 1%, but try giving stuff away. And see what it does for your abundance. See what happens. Keep in your consciousness the idea that supply is outflow, not income. Keep in your consciousness that a belief in lack creates lack, and a belief in abundance creates abundance. And when you find yourself in fear and believing, you discover that you believe you don't have, that you believe you are lacking, tell yourself the truth. Sit down and tell yourself the truth. Do the work. Bring in the contrary information. Tell yourself the truth. Remind yourself, no, what this lab is about not believing that we lack. This lab is about proving our oneness with God, that what we're trying to do is believe the presence, believe the abundance. And so you just remind yourself of that. Now, you can't do anything about the worry except remind yourself of it, and you will discover that the worrying diminishes, and you will get to the point where you're perfectly willing to, to where you don't think about it at all. That has happened to me. I've walked on jobs that, when I had no possibility of finding a job that pays as much as money. Well, when I bought this house and undertook the payment, then I walked out on the job that I had 6 months later because they were asking me to do some things that weren't appropriate for me to do. And so I walked, and it's clear. Work for me to do and will provide, and this is what happened. He does, he did. It even says in AA, he will provide for us if we stay close to him and do his work well. Good old third step stuff, I think. We read that every Monday night.
And you said earlier that you had a period where you were arrogant. Describe what you meant by arrogant. Like what
Arrogant?
How did your arrogance lead to lack of supply? I think that was good.
Well, my original arrogance was, I was born with it, but my first truly strong spiritual display of arrogance was when I was at military school marching to church behind the band playing Onward Christian Soldiers at the Sewanee Military Academy where the Sewanee Seminary is, and watching bishops' wives on both sides of the road, and I looked at all of that and said, this is bullshit. And, failed, of course, to make the distinction between spirituality and religion, and threw out, God and everything with it, and made the decision that I was a lot smarter than these people and I could do it myself. Now, that was an arrogant decision, and I was a sophomore in high school, and there's probably nothing quite as arrogant as a high school sophomore. And it took me until I was 35 to become teachable. It took 18 hard years of alcoholism and losing everything, and before I finally discovered that I couldn't do it myself. A friend of mine says, if you see a drunk in the gutter with one eye open, he's got a plan. So the subsequent was that now I've been to India, and my name has been changed to Satyam Rituraj and back, and then I've worn the orange and had the long hair and the beard and did all that, and now I'm back, and my consulting job is for a law firm. And I, of course, decide that these guys are a bunch of arrogant assholes. And I'm not being of service here. And the next day, plus or minus a week, they had a financial reversal there at the law firm and had to cut loose their consulting services. And so, the arrogance was that I thought I knew what was service and what wasn't, and what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing, and I was pretty holy for working with lawyers, so I go out looking for, a $60,000 a year at the time. This was in '85, a $60,000 a year, doing computer consulting for some absolutely wonderful spiritual organization. I don't know. I expected maybe the Little Sisters of Mercy needed a $60,000 a year computer consultant to come in here and shape up their... I have no idea what I was thinking. But it took 5 or 6 months for me to... Finally, I was sitting there one day. I was doing the 10 or 15 or 20 meditations a day that my sponsor had prescribed. Every time the fear comes up, sit down, and doing exactly what I've told you to do. remember you're in the gymnasium, sit down and tell yourself that there is nothing but abundance and you're one with an infinite abundance and watch it unfold, But the deadline's passed. God's schedule is different than yours, sweetie. Yada, yada. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I got it absolutely clear that I have no idea what would and wouldn't be of service to God. And I really saw it all the way to the center. And my immediate reaction was, oh, okay. And then I made the only sane statement I could make. Okay, don't put anything in front of me that you don't want me to do. Because I can't judge it. Whatever is put in front of me, I will do. And I did this time literally get a call the next day from a lady that owned a home on the Strand in El Porto who had a computer consulting job that paid more than the one at the law firm. And the only difficult thing was that we had to give up working every afternoon at 5:30. We were required to go out on the balcony and watch the sunset. So, obviously these were all spiritual lessons and had absolutely nothing to do with a professional career, but that's what I meant by arrogance. Pretty good word for that, wouldn't you say? Yeah, I think that's the right word. Yeah, that's been my lesson since I was 14. What else? Some people are working with the tapes and getting good results, so you might want to do that.
I had a funny experience with work. The way the hypnotism works in my industry was the hypnotism is that all the work is going to Canada now in the film industry. And I spent 5 months without it. And there wasn't a minute that I didn't feel completely abundant and rich during that time of nothing, from that industry coming in. And then they were going to do this march in Hollywood to bring the work back from Canada. So it was the unions were going to march down Hollywood Boulevard. Well, I don't participate in anything like that. And I got a work call that Sunday, which you don't get, right 1 block from where the march was going to start. And my call was like at 5 p.m. and the march was at 1. And a couple of my friends were going, and I thought, oh, I'll go, it'll be fun. What's the difference? So I went early and marching down Hollywood Boulevard with all the people that I had come into the industry with 20 years previous. The girl that got me in, the first cameraman I worked with, the first everything I worked with. There was like this moment, And I mean, I wasn't marching because I was just hanging out and having a good time. And then I got a job that I hated, and that was the only job happening, quote. And I walked because it wasn't where I was to be. And the very next day I get a job, and I'm now on a 5-month, which is interesting because I had 5 months no work. Now I'm on a 5-month piece of a project that was brought back from Canada by mistake. They had filmed the pilot in Canada, and now we're doing this thing here. Now it was just funny to me that I'm on a show that was brought back from Canada. Now, I did not intentionally do any of that. I mean, it was just all put in front of me. I did not seek to do any of that. I'm not anybody that does marketing. It's not my thing. But it was put in front of me, and I was do this now. Now do this now, Daddy, do this now. And I'm real clear that whether I'm working or not working, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The supply is there. And I'll stay here and do this job until I don't. And maybe tomorrow. I may last the 5 months. I don't know. But from a child I was raised on seek ye first. I love the 2 scriptures because that's what I was raised, seek ye first the kingdom. And as far as the service, this is what's happened to me. And I think the lesson here for me is not judging where I'm to be of service. Because I feel I should be doing spiritual teaching, I should be whatever, I should be out buying some motel in yucca and turning it into a spiritual retreat center up here. And I'm put on this job, and this little girl is falling apart in my chair, and spiritually speaking, and I just said 2 or 3 sentences, and she looked and she said, "Oh my God, I've been praying for a teacher. I never dreamed to be the person putting my makeup on, you know." And it's like all these things are happening this way. I live on that 7-step prayer of remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you. A lot of my defects of character are used. A lot of them are used for useful purposes. I told a dirty joke a couple of weeks ago in a very inappropriate place, at a very inappropriate time. I couldn't believe I was doing it. And it was an awful joke. And it came out of my mouth, and it injured someone very deeply. And as a result, that person got into a program and was telling me today that if I hadn't told that joke and he hadn't spoken up, he would not have known this program, that it all happened, that it existed. And so there I was judging myself. How could you have told that joke? What's the matter with you? I don't know what's of service. A dirty joke was of service after a meditation group, you know. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I know I'm supposed to be right this moment.
Rajneesh used dirty jokes to wean people away from those things which they held as sacred.
Yes.
He would he would wander through, every ethnic group and every religious group and every national group and tell a dirty joke about that group, so that he would, if you had anything that you felt egotistic about or proud of or held sacred or something like that, you would, if you hung around for, a month, he'd get to you. It was just awesome. And he'd just laugh up there and said, "I use dirty jokes like Jesus used parables."
So if you could just totally declare judgment, just totally declare judgment about everything, even what comes out of your mouth.
If you can.
I don't think I should suspend any judgment. I just watch later and look back. Judging's what I do best. I've watched it be suspended. Yes. For accepting. Yes. And also where I'm not on the job with money. Heavens come in and it's like, wow. But that's not why I'm there. I'm a little clear, it's not why I'm there. And I won't be there when I no longer in any service.
Anything else? Okay, let's be quiet for another minute. Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm getting much more out of this class than anybody. Thanks for being here, giving me an excuse.